Okay, so before I start, I should state that I'm not at all in this productivist optic. I don't worry about. I know the competition goes well, and everyone will eventually, at any time, identify a number of very competitive ones that will carry about our food and something to dress eventually, right? Because that's what's agriculture for. But I worry more about the cultural values more than the social values, though they are packed together. And going back to this sustainability definition whatsoever that we carry on with us since 1992 when it was made public in Rio, with this chance of the future generation to have access to the same resources and so on, I think they should also have access to all the culture and the living that we have today. So therefore, I care about the small and many, very often forgotten. Particularly, now we are in Ulaanbaatar, so I don't have to reference that much to EU. Because in EU, we are struggling, particularly in a number of new member states, to push them up on the competitiveness systematically, and even have financial transfers towards them if they promise to increase some of their market share. Well, how successful that goes, I will mention a bit later. Well, before I start, I'm not sure that everyone ever had any contact with Romania, even in terms of data, so I will have some small facts and figures just to say that Romania has the most beautiful waterfall in the world. I didn't make up that thing, it exists. I have a picture of it done by myself, you can find it on the internet as well. It's really beautiful, it's not far from my city. You can drive there in an hour and it's exactly placed on the 45-degree parallel. So you can find it. It's Europe's second largest underground glacier in a nice cave in the Apsen Mountains in the Carpathians. Quite nice to see. In terms of inventions or discovery that are somehow known worldwide, everyone has been coming here, the foreigners at least, by a jet airplane. So that is a Romanian scientist at the base. Also the fountain pen that we use less and less nowadays because we use pencils. Pen is history more, but it's also classy. Also insulin, the fully self-propelled fixed-wing automobile, and the theory of cybernetics, among others. Is the 9th largest wine producer in the world. That should mean something, well, in the recent years at least. And is the Europe's richest country in gold resources. But this is just like in the previous presentation, is just resources, so we don't touch that. Yeah, it's just there, somehow, maybe. Maybe it's still there, I hope so. Okay, so now how large is that thing we talk about? Knowing that Mongolia is the 18th largest country in the world, you could fit like 6.5 Romanias in this. So it's small, for this is really small. It's like 238,000 square kilometers, only that. And it has almost 19 million people, out of which about 4.5 are spread in Spain, Italy, Germany, UK, and some other European countries. And if it unfortunately still happens, the war in Syria, if that wasn't happening, we were the first migrating country in worldwide ranking, unfortunately, again, both for the war and for the migrants. I don't think that's very happy. We have almost 80 people per square kilometer. Life expectancy is beautiful because it exceeds the retirement age, although I don't have any hope to reach any retirement by the time I reach that age, because the age pyramid looks like this, and it's collapsing very soon. And now, if we move to the agricultural part, that means that we have a total number of 3.4 million farms. Now, here a little discussion is necessary, because what we understand by farm as a definition, it includes the agricultural households, which are not properly speaking a farm, are just an agricultural household. But since we address them through this content, yes, they are counted in. So 3.4 million farms. Well, average, which means nothing. I mean, if I get one of you that weighs 80 kilo, together, we have, for myself, a very happy average. I will then only weigh 90 or 100 kilo, but he will feel miserable at 100. Now, so that's a total discussion of about average, and we will not visit it again. The utilized agricultural area, 12.5 million hectares. So it's like 10% of the total grassland in Mongolia, more or less. It's 110 million you have. Okay, now, we will not insist here because I struggle to make good pitch presentation. A pitch presentation has the 10, 20, 30 rule, right? So you have to have 10 slides for 20 minutes written with a font of 30. Now, this doesn't fit that. And it also doesn't fit what I used to preach to the others. Never put more than 3 figures on a slide, no one will remember. Now, the only purpose we have this ugly table here is that because you have these categories that are very, very not often used in other farm structures because they are very small. But also because you have here very big numbers for all those farms and households that counts more than 50% for own consumption. Because this is the subject, these are the target of this presentation. So this figure here, out of 3 million, you will see later on it's accounted for, how many they are. Oops. And in terms of number and not area, again, out of 4 million, most of them are in this area here. So this is the only purpose we have the tables. They're also laid out in the handout, or I can go back if you want to. So in here we have a graphical expression where in the, I don't know how to call this color, women will know better, is harming, yeah, for me is orange. But as the women say, men can only recognize 4 colors. Now the orange one will be the total number of farms that have at most 5 hectares, and that represents 86% from the total farms, or if we only count the ones under 2 hectares, we have almost 70% in the total farms. If we report them to the own consumption above 50%, only them, not all the farms, that small, 95% of them will be under 5 hectares, while 75, at least a little bit more than 3/4, are under 2 hectares. So the same thing you have here, but this time in terms of area and not number. Then we have a research done like more than 10 years ago regarding the semi-subsistence agriculture in some new member states. With this occasion, we managed to profile the semi-subsistence into 4 categories. In this case, the shares correspond to Romania. There are also shares from Poland, maybe Hungary, Bulgaria for sure. And the 4 categories are the rural newcomers. We will later mention these are the guys that are escaping the cities because industry collapsed and there is nothing else to do there. So they went back because they had some property parents and so on. So this is 1/4. A little bit more than 1/4 is the farmers, but the poor farmers, the small ones, those with less than 5 or 2. Then you have the rural diversifiers, which are 41%, and you have the rural pensioners, which are less than 10%. Okay? And then, what is this conservative called for? I mean, it's not conservative because we want to travel back in history and include only archaic methods and stuff like that, and turn it into a living museum for the West Europeans to see how agriculture used to be 100 years ago. But it's conservative in the sense of conserving, not techniques. To some extent, the endemic species, where there are still some, but to preserve the environment by not necessarily a service, it's not services, it's not in that sense, is by actively interacting with the environment, not letting the forest get back the grassland, just grazing and maintaining, cutting, right? So it's a sort of a hybrid form in which they preserve it as it used to be. It doesn't include or exclude things, right? It doesn't necessarily has only the archaic techniques, but it can have some. Or it can have a mix of archaic and new, or it can have only new as well. Mixed use of all the news, as I said, has these purposes: the environmental services and the socioeconomic impact. The socioeconomic impact is because these families will still be there and at least provide for themselves and the others, because most of the goods will be traded between them rather than be a market output, but doesn't exclude the market output. The model assumes maintenance of landscape, traditional use of pasture and meadows, preventing taking, as I said earlier, by the wood. That means that in the last 30 years that I can account for, people were given like, you have the right to produce your hay on that meadow by condition that you maintain the shrubs and trees. So you clean it, and this year you can use it. Next year, someone else can get it. So it's like a sort of a trade. You work that, we don't have to hire and pay someone else. You just do this thing, and then you get the right for it. And it was maintained like that. I know it from my grandfathers from the, I don't know, at least from 40s or 50s, it was like that all the time. But now we see that is disappearing. We see villages, small, in which the pasture and the meadows have reduced by more than 50%. And that's a danger, because no one supports them. And this trade, like, I give you 1,500 euro a year for 4 years, or I give you 15,000 for 7 years, just to come more often to the market, it's not really impacting on this. So, actually, if you only take the farms under 2 hectares, although you will not make a big mistake if you take them under 5. Because 5, it's total area, pasture, meadows, all categories of utilized agricultural area included. It's not only arable land, right? So if we only take the 2 under 2 hectare, that means 1.3, almost 1.4 million hectares of this under 2 hectares. It represents almost 20% of the total farming. But this is usually set into, it happens to be located, I called it a sensitive geolocations. It's usually high hills, mountains, where no one else will go to do farming other than those that are still doing it through tradition, through family, and it's still happening somehow. And if we look at the number, out of these 2.2 million farms, under 2 hectares, which is 70% of the total, if, let's say, you only take half of this, as a supported through this conservative farming, you already have over 1 million families, regardless their age, profile, whatsoever. So socially it's highly important. If you think that the unemployment alone is like less than 600,000, imagine if you put the pressure again to convert everything into commercial or desert area, and you have those people. And you have to treat, deal with, live with. The model actually means what? Means that you have a roughly 20 to 30% commercial output for trade or exchange. That counts for everything. The products that reach the market, local market usually, because the other market does not anymore takes these products because it's organized basically by large supermarkets, so no local products get there. So you have the small open markets in the small and large cities, and local markets, and the exchange between the neighbors. So you will have people that will exchange cheese for fruits that are not grown in the region, as an example. It also contains a lot of high natural value products, not necessarily certified, and it is actually based on the short food chain, because usually even if it gets to the market, it gets from the farmer, so you don't have them somewhere in the middle. It means that about 5 to 10% of the total activities, though their time is counted differently, the activities in this type of agricultural activities or farming are counted by half days. They don't count activities by hours. So they don't say, for 3.5 hours I'm going to go and cut my hay. It's like, today we cut the hay, right? So it has to be extended to cover it. So it's in half days. It was always like that. It usually integrates 50%, sometimes even more, of family non-remunerated members, which means, I don't know, son, wife, husband, cousin even, to help at some moments. So it doesn't take temporary workers. It preserves high rates of self-consumption, which provides for them, because usually we count the consumption based on what we do in the cities. So we count what are the amounts, what are the values, and we say this is what they should consume. But those are not necessarily the same values that they have, and particularly because of this self-consumption. So a kilo of potato produced by the farmer himself is a lot cheaper than the one in the supermarket. It preserves, produces and promotes the endemic source dough that remains, and that includes the seed production. Because for a while people said, that would be nice to have that old variety, bring it in because it's tasty and stuff, but where to get it from? Well, these guys, they do. And I have cases in which people, some of them specialize it. So you have villages in which there is practically no production, not even for the family. They specialize in seed production that they use for the others, and the rest comes as a trade. Okay, so the resilience has already been proved because they had to already go through this change of the system in the 90s from the communist hyper-centralized to the market-based economy, and then again through the 2008-2012 financial crisis. They're still there. Not only that they are still there, but they also accustomed other members of the families that have problems dealing with themselves and providing for themselves in the cities. So they went and also it has this environmental dimension that we'll discuss. It assumes actually small adjustments on low risk because the scale itself is very small. It coexists with a competitive agriculture on non-conflictual basis, although for a while it was considered as a good reservoir to consolidate the middle farms growing. No one is hunting for those lands in the hills and mountains and very small plots, and particularly if they are not ear-tagged with direct payments. So if they are not, plots are not larger than 0.3 and the area is not larger than 1 hectare and the money are not coming, no, they don't look after it. It has a larger elasticity due to the size, of course, and the rural areas remain decently populated, just that I cannot make any estimates, and that means that will keep them alive. I just mentioned, and I will close with this, that people that are interested in producing and making a business out of agricultural production, they hunt the direct payments. Recently, I had this look at, I suspected there is a Paretian link between the direct payments and the number of recipients. And there is a graph, I can look for it if you are interested, in which the first 20 beneficiaries of each country are accounted for the amount of direct payments received. Romania is on the 5th place on EU. 83% of direct payments goes to the first 20% of beneficiaries. So the competitiveness is there, no threat here, when I say they survive on non-competitive grounds. Thank you.